Welcome to my channel. I'm 53 years old for most of my life. I kept things neat, polite, and quiet. I was the kind of woman who made sure the curtains were pressed, the dishes dried in their rack, and the neighbors waved when they passed my driveway. Well, I used to believe it had its time and place, and mine had passed. My husband left a few years ago. And since then, I've lived in stillness, not unhappy, but not really alive either. But then something happened. Something I never expected, something I still can't quite explain. It was one of those moments that starts out so ordinary, so harmless, and then shifts it, left me looking at myself and others in a way I never had before. I never thought something like this could happen to me. Please don't make the same mistake. It was a Thursday morning, the kind where the sky was blanketed in soft gray clouds and the air had that warm, sticky cling of early summer. I had just stepped out of the shower, wrapped loosely in my old burgundy robe, the one that barely reached my knees and had a fraying belt from too many washes. I hadn't planned on seeing anyone. Honestly, I was enjoying a little solitude, letting my hair air dry while sipping coffee by the kitchen window. Then came the knock 3 soft raps at the door. I froze. Who knocks at 9:30 a.m. on a weekday? I patted across the cool tile, one hand holding my robe shut a little tighter, and peered through the side window. It was Mason, my neighbor's son, tall, lean, maybe 23 or 24. His mother, Denise, had mentioned he was home from college for the summer. I'd seen him a few times mowing her lawn, shirtless earbuds and not noticing me. Watching from behind the blinds, I cracked the door. "Hi, Mason, is everything okay?" He smiled that sweet, slightly bashful smile boys carry before they turn into men. "Hey, Miss Carter. Sorry to bug you so early. My mom's not home, and I kind of locked myself out. I blinked out of your house." He nodded. "Yeah, I was taking the trash out and the door slammed shut behind me. I tried calling her, but she's not answering." I glanced down at myself, robe, bare legs, wet hair, and hesitated, but something in his expression was boyish, sincere. He wasn't looking at me the way men usually did. He looked embarrassed, helpless. "All right, come on in. Just keep your eyes at eye level." I teased. He laughed awkwardly and stepped inside, careful not to look too long. I'd guided him to the kitchen, poured him some coffee, and tried not to notice how grum he looked, taller than I remembered. Shoulders broader, his hair was damp with sweat from the sun, and his white t-shirt clung slightly to his chest. "So," I said, leaning against the counter, "you didn't inherit your mom's key-hiding instincts, huh?" He chuckled. "She keeps it in some fake rock, but I swear she moves it every week, classic Denise," I said, and we both laughed. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was curious, like we were both suddenly aware of something neither of us had planned. For my robe had loosened slightly and I adjusted it casually, but Mason's eyes flicked downward for just a moment before he caught himself and looked away. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, taking another sip of coffee. I smiled softly. "It's all right. You're not the first man who's looked, just maybe the youngest, that made him laugh again, a little nervously." "Yeah, well, I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. You weren't," I said, and I meant it. We talked a while about college, his major, his plans, and then something surprising happened. As he stood to refill his cup, he glanced at me and said, "You know, you look good, Miss Carter." It wasn't the words that got me. It was how he said them, like it had been sitting on his tongue for a while, like he wanted to say it before he lost the nerve. I didn't respond right away. I just watched him, his hands slightly shaking as he poured his cheeks redder than before. "Mason," I said slowly, carefully, "you're sweet." But he turned. "I know it's probably stupid. I've always thought you were beautiful, even when I was a teenager." His voice was quiet, his eyes not cocky but open, raw. Even that silence came again, thick-charged, and in that moment something shifted inside me. I wasn't just a woman in a robe anymore. I wasn't invisible, I wasn't past anything, but I also knew whatever happened next. It had to mean something. It had to be more than impulse, so I stepped closer, put a hand on his arm, and said, "Let's sit down a minute." And that's where everything started to change. I led him into the living room, still unsure what I was doing, or more truthfully, what I was feeling. The air felt denser somehow, and my robe, which had been nothing more than comfort a moment ago, now felt like a barrier or a question, or maybe both. We sat on the couch, a cushion of space between us. Mason leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his coffee cradled in both hands like it was giving him courage. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, he said. I just, I thought about saying that for years. I remember coming over with my mom when I was younger. You always smelled like vanilla and wore those pretty cardigans, and you smiled at me like you actually saw me. I swallowed hard. I remembered those visits. Mason would sit at the edge of his mother's shadow. Quiet, polite. His father had already been long gone, and Denise did her best to raise him right. I suppose I'd always admired that. In her, maybe I'd even felt a quiet sympathy for the boy, with the sad eyes and the untied shoelaces. You're not a boy anymore, I said, surprising myself. He turned to look at me, the smallest flicker of something intense in his gaze. Not lust, not exactly. It was deeper, that unspoken, hungry kind of curiosity that asks, could this be real? I know I'm not, he said, his voice softer now, and neither are you just some lady next door that made me smile. What am I then? He shrugged, but he didn't look away. I don't know someone. I've always wanted to talk to someone who seems like they've got a whole world in their eyes. I looked down, blinking faster than usual. I haven't been seen in a long time. I admitted, not like that. Not fully. We sat in silence for a moment that was filled with more than words ever could be. Then I reached for his hand. I didn't mean to, it just happened. His fingers were warm and trembling slightly, but they closed around mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. I'm not sure where this is going, Mason, I said quietly, but I'm not scared of it. His eyes searched mine, me neither. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I was keenly aware of the thrum of blood in my ears, the heat from the morning sun filtering through the windows, the weight of this small and strange moment that had somehow changed everything. There was still space between us, physical space, emotional distance, but it was shrinking slowly with every shared breath, every glance then, as if guided by something unspoken. Mason shifted closer. His hand brushed my knee, not accidentally. I didn't move, I didn't speak, and when his hand lingered, light, unsure, but undeniably real, I looked at him with something close to awe. Can I ask you something? He said, Of course, why did you let me in? His voice cracked a little, as though the weight of the question surprised even him. I smiled again, but it was smaller this time, Statter, because I needed to remember what it felt like to let something in. He nodded, then gently took my hand again. This time lifting it to his lips, a soft, tentative kiss that lingered more in its meaning than its touch. Nothing more happened. Not then, no lines were crossed. No promises made, but I think we both knew something important had begun. Not a love affair, not a mistake, a shift, a recognition, and somewhere deep in my chest I felt the echo of a heartbeat. I thought I'd buried long ago. The rest of that day felt like a dream, wrapped in silence. Mason stayed for another hour, maybe more. We talked about nothing and everything. His plans after graduation, my old job at the library, the tiny rituals that made up our days. I changed into something more proper, a light blouse and soft jeans. But the shift between us had already happened. My robe hadn't been the cause, it had only been the opening. Eventually, he got a text from his mom and said she was on her way back. He stood up slowly like he wasn't sure he wanted to leave, and I walked him to the door. He paused there, fingers grazing the frame. Thank you for letting me be here, I nodded. Thank you for seeing me. Then he left the house. Felt different after that, not emptier, but stirred like someone had opened a window in a room that had been sealed for years over the next few days. I went about my life, grocery runs, folding laundry, sweeping the porch. But something in me had changed. I caught myself looking for his car in the driveway. I stood a little longer by the window. In the mornings, I found myself brushing my hair with more intention, putting on lipstick for no real reason. Then Saturday came. I was trimming the roses out front when I heard footsteps on the gravel. I didn't look up right away. I didn't need to. Hey, Mason said softly. I turned. He wore a dark green t-shirt and jeans. Simple, clean, nervous energy clung to him like humidity. Hey, I replied. You lock yourself out again. He smiled. Nope. Not this time, I arched an eyebrow. Then what brings you here? He stepped closer. I couldn't stop thinking about you. I know it might sound crazy, and I know you probably have every reason to tell me I'm too young or that this is some sort of phase, but I don't care. I meant what I said. The other day, I didn't interrupt. I let him speak. I spent so much of my life around people my age, fast talkers, loud energy, always chasing the next thing. But you make space, you breathe in silence. I feel calm around you, I feel real. My chest tightened. Mason? I began, but he stopped me. Please, I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to see you again. And I wanted you to know that this, whatever this is, it matters to me. His voice didn't shake. This time it was quiet but strong. I stepped forward, unsure what I was doing until I was inches away. You're not a kid. I see that now. And you're right. There is something here, but it's delicate and it's complicated. I've spent a long time guarding myself from risk, from feeling too much, from wanting something I wasn't sure I could have. Again, Mason looked down. I don't want to hurt you and I don't want to leave you somewhere you'll regret. I said. We stood in that tender tension for a long moment. Then gently I reached up and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, a mother's gesture perhaps, but laced with something deeper. I'm not ready to define this, and I said, but I'm not ready to walk away from it either. He exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for days. Would you? He asked hesitantly. Maybe want to go for a walk later. Just talk, no pressure. I smiled. I'd like that. He turned to go, then hesitated. You smell like roses. That's because I was fighting with one. I chuckled. He laughed, the sound easy and young and full of something fresh. Then he walked away. I stood there for a while, watching the space where he had been. The rose clippers still in my hand, the scent of petals in the air. My heart beat in a rhythm I hadn't known. It still remembered. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something. And for the first time in years, I wanted to see where it might lead. The sun dipped low behind the trees as I stepped out onto the front porch that evening, a soft breeze stirring the hem of my light cotton dress. It had been years since I'd felt the flutter of anticipation that now danced quietly in my chest. I didn't try to dress younger than I was. I didn't need to. I was simply me. And somehow that finally felt like enough. Mason showed up. Just as the sky turned gold, he was carrying 2 cold lemonades and wearing that same quiet, nervous smile. You always this prepared, I teased, taking one of the cups. I figured I owed you a proper invitation after just showing up on your doorstep twice. We laughed, and then without needing to say anything else, we started walking. We moved down the neighborhood path that curved along the creek behind our row of houses, a place I rarely visited, though it was only steps away. The sound of frogs chirping and the rush of the water filled the pauses between our words. We talked about things that didn't need answers. Books we'd read, the weird neighbors down the street, childhood memories, but under it all was a current. Neither of us wanted to name just yet, a sense that this wasn't just a walk, it was a crossing. As we reached a quiet bench tucked under an old sycamore, Mason gestured for me to sit. The light bathed us in amber, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then he said, I wasn't sure if coming back home this summer would mean anything. I thought I'd just waste time, wait it out. But you being around you, it's been the most honest I felt in a long time. His words hung in the air, tender and unpolished. I turned toward him when my husband left. I told myself I was done with that kind of feeling. I built a quiet life, safe, predictable. But you cracked something open in me. Mason, not just attraction, though. Yes, there's that, but something softer, braver. You reminded me that I'm still here. He looked at me, then really looked, and I could see the mix of reverence, hesitation, and want, not possession, not recklessness, but recognition. I don't want to mess this up, he said. You haven't. I whispered, not even close. And then, with every bit of permission and clarity passing between us, he reached for my hand. I let him. I wanted to. His thumb moved slowly across my knuckles, grounding us in the moment. I don't know what comes next, I said. Me neither. He replied, but I'd like to keep finding out with you. I leaned in, then rested my head gently against his shoulder. We sat like that, As the light faded the air, cooling around us, the world still and kind, for just a little while longer, there was no dramatic ending, no declarations or promises written in stars, just a quiet acknowledgement that life in all its stranges sometimes delivers something unexpected when you least expect it, something that doesn't need a label to be real. And as we stood to walk back home side by side in the deepening dusk, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope not the kind tied to fairy tales, but the kind born from presence, from being seen, from letting yourself be open, even after the world has told you to close. And maybe that's what love really is. Not youth, not perfection, just two people reaching gently across a line. They never planned to cross and finding something honest waiting on the other side.